Have you ever felt like just a cog in a machine at work? Or have you been lucky enough to feel like a truly valued collaborator? You know, the difference between those two feelings is a story that's been over a century in the making. Today, we're going to trace that incredible evolution of management from the factory floor all the way to the modern office to really understand how we got here.
It's a universal question, right? Why is it that one job can light you up while another one just completely crushes your soul? The answer, it turns out, isn't just about your boss or the paycheck. Nope. It's actually a story written over 100 years full of competing ideas about what really makes us tick. And understanding that story is the key to understanding your own workplace.
So, before we can get into how things evolved, we got to start with the original blueprint. For the early pioneers of management, an organization was seen as a perfectly engineered machine. It wasn't about people, it wasn't about culture, not at all. It was a structure intentionally designed for one thing and one thing only: maximum efficiency. This single idea is the foundation for everything that comes next.
And you might be thinking this is all ancient history, but check this out. A huge majority of companies today are incredibly young. This means these fundamental questions of how to organize people, they aren't just theoretical. They're being figured out right now in millions of startups and new businesses all around the world. The problems of the past are still very much the problems of today.
All right, so let's rewind. Let's go all the way back to the beginning. Imagine a world with no HR departments, no job titles, none of the rules we just take for granted today. Let's go back to what we'll call the Great Factory Problem. The Industrial Revolution wasn't some gentle shift. It was an earthquake. I mean, think about it. Work went from the quiet rhythm of a family loom in a cottage to the deafening roar of 1,000 machines in a massive factory. This wasn't just a change in scale. It was a fundamental change in how human beings even organize themselves.
And all this incredible progress created problems nobody had ever seen before. For the first time, you had thousands of people under one roof who weren't an army. So how do you coordinate them? How do you keep the machine running efficiently? And crucially, how do you manage a workforce of former farmers and artisans who are now doing the same simple, repetitive task hour after hour? Nobody had the answers.
So, the first people to even try and answer these massive questions, they weren't sociologists or psychologists. Nope, they were engineers. They looked at the factory and saw a machine that just needed to be optimized. And this approach became known as the classical school of management.
And leading the charge was this guy with a stopwatch and a serious obsession, Frederick Winslow Taylor. If you've ever felt the pressure of a deadline or had your work process picked apart, well, you felt his legacy. He believed there was a science to work, and he was determined to find it.
Taylor's method, scientific management, was a total game changer. The whole idea was to get rid of all the guesswork. He would scientifically analyze every single task, down to the tiniest motion, to find the one best way. Then, he'd pick the best person for that job and train them to perfection. And when the Ford Motor Company adopted these principles for the assembly line, productivity didn't just increase, it exploded.
Now, while Taylor was zooming in on the individual worker, another thinker, Max Weber, was zooming out, looking at the bigger picture. He focused on the entire organizational structure. He's the father of bureaucracy. And hang on, he didn't mean it as a bad word. For Weber, bureaucracy was just the most logical way to run things, with clear rules, a defined hierarchy, and promotions based on merit, not who you know.
So here's the crucial point. The entire classical school viewed the organization as a machine. If you designed it right, with all the right parts and the right instructions, it should run perfectly. The human element, it was just another component, just another cog in the machine.
But this perfectly engineered machine had a glitch. A big one. The human parts, you see, weren't behaving like predictable cogs. And a series of now famous experiments would uncover a fundamental flaw in this entire approach, one that would change absolutely everything. You see, the classical theorists had this huge blind spot. They forgot to ask one simple, fundamental question. What happens when the cogs in your machine have feelings, motivations, and, social needs?
And the discovery came almost completely by accident. Researchers at the Hawthorne Works factory were studying the effects of lighting on productivity, but they were completely baffled. No matter what they did with the lights, brighter, dimmer, productivity went up. They eventually realized the workers weren't responding to the lights. They were responding to the attention. For the first time, someone was actually asking for their input. This became known as the Hawthorne effect.
So the researchers kept testing, moving from lighting to other physical conditions, and the results just stayed bizarre. Productivity kept rising even when conditions got worse. It was only when they finally put down their clipboards and just started talking to the employees that the truth emerged. The real drivers of productivity weren't physical at all. They were social and psychological.
The Hawthorne studies just blew the doors wide open. The new question wasn't how to make people work, but why they work. And this kicked off a whole new era focused entirely on unlocking the secrets of human motivation.
This search for why led directly to thinkers like Abraham Maslow. He proposed that our needs are layered, kind of like a pyramid. You can't offer someone a chance at self-actualization if they're worried about job security or just paying their rent, right? Maslow's big insight was that managers needed to understand and address these fundamental needs before they could expect any kind of higher performance.
Building on this, Douglas McGregor basically forced managers to look in the mirror. He said every leader operates on one of two basic assumptions. There's theory X, people are inherently lazy and need to be micromanaged, or there's theory Y. People actually want to contribute and do good work if you just give them the chance. And whichever assumption you hold, McGregor argued, it dictates your entire management style. Then came a really counterintuitive idea from Frederick Herzberg. He argued that the things that make you dissatisfied at work are completely different from the things that make you truly satisfied. A decent salary and a safe office, what he called hygiene factors, they won't make you love your job. They just prevent you from hating it. True motivation, Herzberg found, comes from things like recognition, growth, and meaningful work. Okay, so after that whirlwind tour through history, let's bring it all home. How do these century-old ideas actually show up in your day-to-day life? You might be surprised.
Think about your own job. That company off-site, that's Maslow's need for social belonging. The trust to work from home, pure theory Y. That feeling of pride you get when you're given a new responsibility, that's Herzberg's motivators in action. See? These aren't just old theories, they are the invisible architecture of our entire working lives.
When you zoom all the way out, you can really see that the history of management is the history of us trying to figure ourselves out. It's this slow, century-long pivot from asking, how can we make people more efficient, to asking the much more profound question, what makes people want to contribute in the first place?
And this evolution is still happening today. So I'll leave you with this question to chew on. In our new world of remote and hybrid work, where the old rules are kind of out the window, which of Maslow's needs is now the most important for companies to get right? Is it safety? Is it social connection? Or is it something else entirely? The answer will define the next chapter of work.